welcome to Psychology Theater. Tonight I will be your narrator, Wendy Burris. We are going to be discussing Helen Bradford Thomas Woolley. So please sit back and enjoy the story. Helen Bradford Thomas Woolley was born in Chicago on November 6, 1874. Helen Thompson received an undergraduate degree at the University of Chicago in 1897, where she also earned her PhD in psychology in 1900. While at the University of Chicago, she studied under James Roland Angle and John Dewey. Professor Dewey was one of Woolley's strongest supporters in her ideas of educational reform. After graduate studies, she became director of psychological laboratories at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. Shortly after, she married the famous Dr. Paul Woolley, accomplished and wrote the clinical history and outline for medical students. Helen became the director of the Vocational Bureau of Public School System in Cincinnati, Ohio. She served as president of the National Vocational Guidance Association. Woolley became a staunch supporter of in-school vocational guidance programs. Woolley became the first woman and first psychologist elected president of the National Vocational Guidance Association in 1921. During her presidency, she continued to promote her vision of education based on the application of physical and psychological tests. The Vocational Bureau of the Cincinnati Public Schools developed into one of the most progressive vocational programs in the country by 1921. The Bureau delivered career counseling, vocational guidance and placement, physical and psychological testing, educational measurement and testing, protection and services for individuals with physical or mental disabilities, preventative measures for juvenile delinquency, and scholarships for students. Helen Bradford Thomas Woolley also worked at the Merrill Palmer Institute, where she established a nursery school program to study child development and mental abilities. One of her biggest influences were Roland Angle and John Dewey. While at the University of Chicago, she studied under each one of them, completing research. Helen Woolley was the first to complete research to directly challenge the non-empirical yet accepted psychological writings on the biological basis of the inferiority of women. She made substantial changes in the way research would be reported in the future. One of her other biggest influences was while working at the Hull House in Chicago as a volunteer for Adams and Kelly. At the same time, James R. Angle directed Woolley's doctoral thesis, which was the first research comparing mental traits of men and women. Woolley matched the control group and the treatment group in social, economic, and educational background, controlled for confounding variables, and refrained from using distorted distributions of data. This has never been done before. Unlike her colleagues, Woolley followed in Francis Galt's footsteps, reported and graphed the distribution of all the score. Francis Galt's footsteps guided Woolley in her research. She found that the distribution curve of the female participants in her study overlapped the distribution curve of the male participants in her study. Such research had been designed by Francis Galt in previous research studies. Her novel approach to writing about research allowed others to easily reproduce her study and offered a window into her interpretation of her. Results of Woolley's thesis demonstrated significant similarities between the sexes. In the minor differences that did occur between the sexes, she pioneered the concept that nurture environment rather than nurture and biology attributed to the few differences discovered between the sexes. Helen Bradford Thomas Woolley published her doctoral thesis, Psychological Norms in Men and Women, in 1903. By using this title, she pioneered the use of norms as a noun. Woolley published research on gender differences, discouraged the use of biological determinism to oppress women, and offered the scientific data they needed to find roles outside the home. Psychologists no longer created narratives connecting differences between the male and female brain. This concludes our discussion of Helen Bradford Thomas Woolley. We'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. I hope this was very informative